Good evening. It's Janet McElligott. It's Tuesday, November 18th. And one of the interesting things about the Sudan is the number of people who have vied for power and who are traitors to the country and to its people. We have to look at first what someone who is a traitor is. They've betrayed their ideals, their principles, and the people who either put them in power or made them successful. One of the easiest people to point to as a traitor was the chief of staff for, at least in recent history, was the chief of staff for President Bashir, Taha Hussein. Taha Osman Hussein is someone who never liked me, and I never liked him. I thought he was a cold fish. But that's not what made him a traitor. It became clear that for years, he was actually a spy for the Saudi government, and people think also for the UAE. When this came to light, Bashir fired him, but it was too late. Taha had acted as a gatekeeper, and I don't know why he held such sway over the Sudanese president, but ministers who needed to come and see him never were able to, including the foreign minister. And Taha himself stood in and betrayed the foreign minister of the Sudan and acted as if he were the one in charge of everything, because I think he thought he was the de facto president. Another person who thought he was the de facto president was Salah Ghosh. The first time I met Salah was at his house, which was close to Anis Hajar's house. And I briefed him on what was going on with the United States. And we had tea, and it was an okay meeting. And as we walked to the door, he walked behind me. He actually reached over and pinched my ass. And I was shocked. And I turned around and I had my hand raised and I stopped right here before slapping him. And he could see I had fire in my eyes. I don't know if he did that to test me or to test me, if you know what I mean. But Salah was someone who reminded me of a crab. You know how a crab has pinchers and grabs everything and moves it in? To me, Salah did that. And he then acted like he was the de facto president. And the night that Bashir was overthrown, and Bashir had stopped listening to anybody, it seemed like to me, but the night that Bashir was overthrown, Taha went in and assured him that everything was fine. And it wasn't until 4 hours later that President Bashir realized that Salah Ghosh betrayed him. You can look at businessmen who have had alliances with the UAE. And one of them is Osama Dayoud. Now, Osama, the very first time I met him was I think it was August of 1997 or 98. Can't remember which. I think it was 98. And he was the president of the Nubian flour mills. He was a really smart businessman. He had a number of really good businesses in Sudan. He had Coca-Cola. He did the Kicks. He had Ozone, which was everybody's favorite coffee shop. He had a lot of very loyal people who worked for him, and he took good care of his people. He was also funded by the UAE, and you see where he is these days. He's in the Emirates, and he has Emirati citizenship. He was very deeply funded by the UAE. Now, a businessman is a bit different than a politician. A businessman is somebody who has to read the tea leaves. And if he got his funding from the UAE, I don't know what kind of deals he made. He was never my friend. He was never someone that I would sit down and chat with, or that I got along with, or that I didn't get along with. And I know that a lot of people believe that he's a traitor these days for what he's done. Time will tell if that's accurate, but he was above all a businessman. The biggest traitor that the Sudanese have had in recent history is Mohammed Dagalo. He was created by Bashir, The RSF was the Janjaweed, and they were used as a weapon against the people of Darfur and the people of the South. The Janjaweed in English meant devils on horseback, and they would go to attack the supply train. Now, Hamiti was somebody who was a camel trader. He was very uneducated. I don't know if he ever learned to read or write, but he was a brilliant, and I use was because everyone tells me he died in May of 2003, except for the Egyptians who said they just recently killed him. This guy's died so many times that he's like a cat with 9 lives. I wonder how many of them he's used up. But Hamiti was utilized by Bashir to, be a weapon. He never brought him to the capital, but the minute he was brought to the capital, he began his betrayal of the people once again, because that's what he knew. And things weren't stable after the overthrow of Bashir, which is why we're where we are right now in the Sudan, with Hamiti thinking that he could take over. He was providing troops in Yemen to fight against the Houthi. And I think that maybe gave him the feeling that he could win in Sudan. And I think Taha Osman Hussein was also involved in that, because after he defected from Sudan and went to Saudi Arabia, when he became not very useful to the Saudis, because who trusts a traitor, he went to the UAE. And I suspect, although I don't know it for a fact, I suspect that he convinced the Emiratis, hey, why don't you take the whole country? I can help you. And they, again, were going to use Hamiti as a tool. Well, Hamiti has proved to be a traitor, but he hasn't proved to be a very useful tool, because his people have been, like him, uneducated and soulless. And they have perpetrated one of the worst horrors on the Sudanese people, betraying Sudanese themselves and thinking that they can move in anybody they want to take over land that doesn't belong to them. So how do you find a traitor, and how do you know who might be one before they turn on you? Being a public servant means you have the trust of the people who put you there. When that trust begins to erode, it's time for them to go. Don't give someone the opportunity to blackmail, to betray, and to betray their country. Make sure that anti-corruption laws are firmly in place as Sudan rebuilds, and make sure that there are certain things that require checks and balances between Parliament, the executive branch, judicial branch, and make sure that as you go forward, the opportunity to take $109 million like Taha Osman Hussein did doesn't exist. And if it does happen, that you have mechanism, laws, and you have things in place to make them an example, because that's how you both spot and get rid of a traitor and make sure that nobody else wants to be that. Thanks. I'll see you again.